I really feel like people have to stop comparing the Ryan Garcia that Tank fought and the Ryan Garcia that Devin Haney fought. They're just not the same fighter. You have a guy like Ryan Garcia who is really calling Tank out. He was ready to make that fight happen. He just signed the contract because he knew that ultimately if he didn't agree to the 136-pound weight, catch weight, and then the rehydration clause for 10 pounds, he knew that, if he didn't agree to those restrictions and stipulations in the contract, that fight would have never happened. That's the reason why that Ryan Garcia signed the contract, because if he didn't, we don't get that big fight. We don't get that fight where we got 1.2 million pay-per-view buys and they both left with $20 million after the fight. And people always like to say, don't sign the contract then, don't sign the contract. If Ryan Garcia didn't agree to the catch weight and the rehydration clause, we wouldn't have gotten that fight between Tank and Ryan. And people have to understand that. Ryan did something that a lot of fighters wouldn't do. He sacrificed his O for the greater good of boxing, because boxing was in a place where Spence wasn't fighting Terrence. Terrence said the side of the street stuff, that he doesn't need Errol Spence Jr., and it was a difficult time for the sport at the time, and Ryan Garcia took it upon himself to make that Tank fight happen. If Ryan didn't agree to the 10-pound rehydration clause and the 136-pound catch weight, that fight doesn't happen, and boxing loses one of the biggest fights of the year, one of the biggest spectacles that we've seen in a while. So I'm thankful to Ryan Garcia that he made that fight happen, and then he ultimately got that fight with Devin Haney. He came in 3 pounds over the 140-pound weight limit, so he sacrificed something, though. He gave up the title. He didn't get the title, but he said, let me win this fight, and he did that. Whether or not it gets overturned, Devin Haney fought a different version of Ryan Garcia that Tank didn't fight. That's the bottom line. And I'm not saying that Tank doesn't beat Ryan Garcia in a rematch. That's very possible. I'd still probably favor Tank a little bit, but I still think that's a really competitive fight. I've been saying that Ryan Garcia and Tank is just too big of a fight for the sport to let it slip out of their hands, and I think there's going to be too much money on the table for Ryan Garcia and Tank to walk away from that rematch. I think there's just too many eyeballs in that rematch, and a lot of people would be missing out on a lot of money if they were to go in a different direction from the Tank and Ryan rematch, because it's such a big fight right now. I feel like with everything going on with Ryan Garcia testing positive for Ostarine, and then at the same time, claiming that it could be a contaminated supplement, and then Devin Haney doesn't want to fight the rematch. If he doesn't want it, then the biggest fight for Tank is probably going to end up being Ryan Garcia in a rematch if he can't fight a guy like Vasily Lomachenko, Shakur, Teofimo Lopez. Those are all good fights for Tank, but I still think Ryan Garcia does more numbers in a rematch with Tank. So I'm curious to see that fight, how it would look, but ultimately it would have to be a discussion about the weight, because they would have to agree where it would take place. Would it take place at welterweight? But ultimately, I think Tank is a little bit too small for 47 right now. Even seeing him get ready for Frank Martin on June 15th, he still looks pretty small for 47 in my opinion. I'm not saying that he's not a a natural 35-pounder, and he's not setting into the 35-pound weight division. I'm just saying that he's still not a big 35er, and then you're gonna ask him to go to 40 and 47 because Ryan Garcia can make 40. So I don't know where that rematch would take place, but I really think that they have to find a way to make it happen, because I think there's ultimately too much money. Like I said before, I think that it's not only Tank and Ryan Garcia that would make a lot of money off the rematch. It's their promoters. Al Heyman would make a lot of money, and then Oscar De La Hoya would also make a lot of money. So I'm excited because I do think that that's such a big fight that neither fighter can really afford to walk away from. They can. It's just man, I could have made another maybe instead of 20 million, both fighters could potentially make 40. They could double their last purse. So I'm curious to see that. Ultimately, I'd be happy with any big fight if it's for Tank, fighting a guy like Shakur Stevenson, Teofimo Lopez, or Vasily Lomachenko. All big fights for Tank. Those are very explosive fights. I think right now, after Frank Martin, Tank really has to make a big fight happen. Not saying that Frank Martin's not a credible opponent. I'm not saying that. I just think that, all the people want to see him against key names. The key names for Tank to face are obviously Shakur, obviously Devin Haney, even though we saw what Devin, the beating that he took from Ryan Garcia. I think we still want to see Devin and Tank. But ultimately, there's also Teofimo, there's also Lomachenko, So a lot of big fights for Tank. I'm excited to see what he does next. I think he can only play this matchmaking game for so long. I'm not saying he's cherry picking. I just think that he's fighting styles that he knows he's gonna look good against it, and that helps him ultimately, and that's good for the sport. That's good for all of these future fights because it builds them. He needs that Leo Santa Cruz knockout. Imagine all the promotions we've seen for Tank. Name one that hasn't included that Leo Santa Cruz knockout because it was so big, but people don't always mention the fact that Leo was brought up in weight to make that fight happen. Even though he's a very credible name, Leo's the taller fighter, Tank was the bigger guy. He was used to the weight class, so it's just like at some point Tank is going to fight guys that ultimately people want to see him against because it really is a much more competitive fight, and they're big names, you know what I mean? So Tio's a big name, guys like Vasily Lomachenko, Shakur, and Devin, and obviously the Ryan Garcia rematch like I'm talking about right now. Those fights are all big for Tank. You're talking like ultimately minimal $200 million for Tank. If he made all those fights happen, I'm saying. I don't think he's going to make all those fights happen. We're probably going to miss out on 2 or 3, but I really do want to see it. And if he gets through Frank Martin like we do expect him to, you can't go down in opposition again. Like you could have that Isak Cruz rematch. You have a lot of names, but you can't fight someone that's at a level below Frank Martin, in my opinion. I think it looks bad because you're approaching 30 already, and as good as you are, as much as I pick him, I pick Tank to beat all of these guys at 35 and 40 because I think that the power is just too much. I think that Tank is going to get to display some of his boxing against Frank Martin, and as he continues to fight guys that challenge him and fight more on the back foot, he's going to get to showcase his boxing ability, whereas he's been fighting come forward fighters, so he's only been displaying the power, his ability to set traps. But Tank can box, like there's no doubt about it. Tank can really box, and I'm excited for him to showcase that. I think we're entering that time where it's about time that we're going to see him fight some boxers, against Shakur, against guys like Devin. He's going to have to box a little bit. And I'm not saying he doesn't stop those guys because I expect him to stop those guys. I just think that there's a little bit more strategy to beating guys like those. There's a little bit more of a puzzle to solve it. It's a little bit difficult. These guys aren't come forward. Tank might have to hunt for these guys and take the risk of getting countered by guys like Shakur and Devin. But, we know that Tank has belittled guys like Shakur and Devin, saying that they have no power. How are they going to keep me off of them when I'm coming with, throwing hands and landing heavy shots on you when you have no power to make me back off? That is a factor as well. But I think a guy like Teofimo Lopez is probably, Tank's toughest test if we're talking about 140, because Teo does have a lot of power. He's athletic as well, and he's a counter puncher. If he fights the right fight, he could give Tank some problems. I'm still gonna, for me, Teo and Tank is a very close-ish fight. Like in my opinion, I don't know who wins that fight because Teo's big. Teo's a big 40-pounder, and I'd be excited to see it because Teo's athletic and Teo hits hard. So Tank and Teo is also a big fight as well. I would really be excited to see that one as well. But I just think that Tank, like, it's getting to the point where, after this fight, it's like, come on, we got to get something popping. We got to get Shakur. We got to get Lomachenko, or move up to 40 and fight guys like Isak Cruz or fight guys like Teo. Like, that's realistically what it comes down to. I'm not trying to tell Tank what to do. Obviously, it doesn't matter what I say, but I'm just saying that I really do like those fights for him now, because you don't want it to get to a point where he's like 32, 33. Not saying that he can't be in his prime at those ages, but ultimately Tank's 29. You're approaching 30. We don't want to see these fights when you're already on the decline, and I'm not saying that that's coming anytime soon, but boxing moves fast. Tank hasn't fought in a year. He hasn't fought in over a year, so if he continues to take a long layoff after this fight with Frank Martin, who knows what's going to happen in the time between. He could start to age, deal with injuries. Inactivity is a real thing. Ring rust is a real thing, in my opinion. So Tank has to stay active after this Frank Martin fight, and it's up to him. But I do think that he should increase the level of opposition. Fight guys like Lomachenko and Shakur if you're going to stay at 35. If not, move up to 40 and fight guys like Teo, maybe that Isak Cruz rematch. But make the big fights happen for Tank, because we're ready for them and we're excited for them. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. You know, I don't like when they compare the Ryan Garcia that Tank fought and then the one that Devin fought. I just think it's two different guys. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Who should Tank fight next? Let me know in the comments. But thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
That's going to do it for another NASFight Media video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been your boy, Matt Nabong, with another video. Hope you guys enjoyed it all. Thank you guys for the constant support. Salute to y'all always. It's been your boy.